Can you tell me what This Is Rabbit does?
Tries to make people smile. Trying to create little characters and stories which hopefully brighten the urban landscape.
Is there a deeper message to your work as well?
I would love to say that there was, and I would love even more to say that I felt there needed to be, but and I definitely appreciate street artists who have bigger messages to convey and more important things that they want to tell. But at the same point, I think things are just so grey these days, and is it not enough to just make someone smile? And people, especially in the city, when you're travelling around, it's so easy to just get in a pattern and just go, this is what I do and this is how it works, and that's a wall, and that's an advertising billboard, and now I'm going to have my coffee and clock in. And if you can find a tiny dancing rock somewhere, or if you see a cloud that's got something to say, then you might not like it, but at least it'll disrupt that pattern and hopefully get someone to question, well, why is it there? What does it mean? And maybe that's enough.
Can you tell me about your style of making street art? Because I know there's lots of different styles.
The predominant thing that I do is wheat paste, which is paste ups, which means I print out or make paperworks and then bring them out onto the street and paste them up with a bucket and a bunch of flour and water mixed together.
And you do this pretty late at night?
Generally. Although the great thing about doing paste ups is that you don't actually have to, because it's very easy to pass it off as though you're postering for gigs or things like that, so people leave you alone.
Have you had any incidents where people have got angry while you've been putting up street art?
Yeah, definitely. Plenty. I'd say I think my favourite one was we were doing some street art and some guy in a 4-wheel drive just stopped and was just yelling out the window of his 4-wheel drive at us, and it's just funny because we kind of just finished what we were doing. We sort of looked at him and said, no, he's not going to get out of his car, so we'll just finish what we're doing and move on. And street artists do share sort of an unspoken goal, which is to subvert, to change, to jam on what's around.
Yes, although there's an overlap with graffiti art, because some of the better known street artists are also quite respected in graffiti circles.
There's so many grey areas, like how do you define graffiti and where's the line between graffiti and street art? And it's words, isn't it? It's like, what is graffiti? Is it making a mark? Is graffiti making a mark in a public space? Well, then it's all one thing. Then you go, oh, okay, well, then is it street art? Does street art have to have a message? Is that what makes it street art? Or does it become culture jamming, where it's you're looking at the things which are around you and subverting those? Doing paste up art, you don't get grouped easily in with graffiti artists. But as soon as you do stencil art, all of a sudden people are a lot more suspicious. If you're on the street with a bucket of paste and some big paper, people are like, oh yeah, just some kids doing what they do and putting up whatever. But if you're out there with a spray can and some stencils, then you better hope that it's early in the morning and there's not many people around, because otherwise, people get called and, security, people pay attention and things like that. So the perception is, if you have a spray can, then you're doing something wrong.
Well, maybe it's a good time for me to ask you, in your opinion, is tagging art?
I don't know. Is it art? If I have an exhibition, rent an exhibition space, and then put a rotten apple in the middle of the floor, and then have an exhibition, is that art?
If you write a nice blurb about it.
So if I write my name on a wall and then write a nice blurb that goes with it, all of a sudden is that art? It's like, well, yeah, actually it probably would be. If you saw a tag up and someone had framed a little bit of board next to it with a description of how they came up with those letter forms and what it meant to them, then we'd probably go, nice, I can see that. He's talking about this and that, and it's, I would say, any time that people are trying to convey a message, it's art. Is it good art? Is it exciting art? Does it touch you? Does it change you? Those are questions which only people can look at. I mean, let's face it, you can't, if a tagger walks past and sees someone else's tagged over their tag, you could argue that the new tag is a powerful piece of art. It's violated that person's space. It's, that's confrontation. You won't get, let's face it, if you see if the emotion that person feels, which is, probably a lot of aggression, you'd have trouble trying to replicate that in a gallery or even with a piece of artwork on someone's wall.
Yes. On the other hand, a gallery space is rented and condoned, and whoever owns that gallery has agreed for that tag to occupy his space. Whereas if you stick it on someone's back fence, then presumably the person who owns the back fence isn't as pleased to have it as the gallery owner would be.
And why would they be? I mean, and that's one of those things, is they didn't ask for it, they don't understand it, they're not that excited by it, and I guess, tagging in terms of that is people, you feel violent. I mean, anytime your property is damaged or, and because it makes you feel unsafe, someone comes and writes their name on your thing, you're like, actually, that's my fence.
We were talking earlier about how some well-known artists who now have a name and sell their work in galleries for thousands of dollars still go out on the streets and stick their art on public property, and how in actual fact these days, if those people were disciplined for doing that, even though it is technically breaking the law, that there'd be a bit of a public outcry, because I mean, after all, these guys are legitimate artists and they're giving their art away for free.
Yeah.
So I mean, which is essentially what you're doing as well.
Well, but there's also an interesting crossover there, is because we've changed from someone's fence to a public space as well. Someone's fence is someone's fence, and and then you've got to use your own discretion as to whether how you feel as a person doing work on someone's fence. Still, people in England who get upset over Banksy paintings popping up, but the big difference is that they're worth so much money now, as if he goes and spray paints a stencil on a wall, generally the owner of that wall is weighing up whether they should call a concrete cutter or not. Maybe I can carve this out and put it on eBay. But the interesting thing too is that it is, there's a fine line between putting street art in a gallery and getting street artists in a gallery. And so, I mean, things like, the awesome thing in New Zealand is that our street artists, as soon as they stepped into a gallery, like especially looking at people like the Cut Collective, their work is incredible. They give it, they treat it as gallery work, and a lot of it has really beautiful messages. It's well executed, and that's where, are they still street artists or are they now fine artists? And it's like, well, what does it even matter? They're just doing stuff.
Yeah.
So I went to an exhibition of Banksy's work in London, and it was the opposite. It was literally a gallery filled with canvases that had one or two colour stencils just spray painted onto them very quickly, and I thought it was terrific to me, because it was kind of him poking his tongue out at his own fame.
Yes.
But at the same point you go, well, does that do, charging £500 for a piece of street art that was literally just a piece of street art and was something very disposable. It's a very interesting thing to take that into a gallery space and elevate it.
Yes, I see what you're saying. It's a mockery of the whole idea of street and art.
Yeah, and the fact that people paid is terrific. But I think the beautiful thing in New Zealand at the moment is that our street artists are just making awesome works that have all of the soul of street art, but all of the craftsmanship and finish of fine art, and which is what I think has made especially people like the Cut Collective made them so appealing to buyers and just so inspirational to other street artists who are around.